Hi, everybody. This is Patty Toledo. We are starting with one more creative raids. This today with Renee Gittins from Stumbling Cat. It's one of my favorite company names ever. I know. I say that every time meet Renee, and she goes, mm-hmm. and with my dearest Sophia today here. And first of all, let's start from the beginning. Renee, can you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more, and the microphone is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe my cat will join so we can get all of the cat action. We'll see.
Yay.
As noted, my name's Renee Gittins. I'm currently the CEO and creative director of Stumbling Cat, and we're very close to shipping our title, Potions: A Curious Tale, an adventure crafting game about a young witch. I have held many positions in the industry, but right now I am also sitting on the IGDA Alumni Board of Directors, having previously been on the Board of Directors as well as the Executive Director of the IGDA. And I do my best to volunteer to help out local groups, IGDA Seattle, etc. And then I guess the last role I held prior to this was I was the general manager of Phoenix Labs Vancouver.
Nice. And Sophia, you guys all know. Sophia, want to say
Yeah.
hi?
Hey, yes, to anyone watching on video. Sorry, I am here. Consider me here. Well, not more than spirit, but yes, you can't see my face, but I'm definitely here.
But if you're watching, if you're listening in audio, you're gonna be happy. It's all
Yeah,
good.
you won't know any difference.
So, Renee, I wanted to ask something that I to start talking about the beginning of your career. I think we can't ignore the fact that we are all women in games here. Although the term "women in games" give me a pet peeve, I tell later why. But as a person that started in games quite a long time ago, like us, did you feel
It's been a minute.
yeah, we're all old farts in the industry. So how did you start your career? How hard was it? And what was the path that you took? And what were the things that were easiest for you, and the things that were like that you felt were real challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think something that is different for at least my journey, aside from it being a hectic journey, is that I didn't actually realize I could be a game developer for a very long time. So I was a passionate gamer very early in my life. When I was like 4 or 5, I started playing first-person shooters. Not how most people start, not how most women start getting into video games, but those were the games available in my house. So I was playing Wolfenstein 3D and Doom and Duke Nukem 3D, and then Pokemon Yellow. I eventually got into more appropriate, age-appropriate games at that point. But it actually wasn't until my senior year of college that I realized I could be a game developer, that a game development path was possible. Unfortunately, I was 3 and a bit years into my education as a engineer with a focus in mechanical engineering, hoping to enter the biotech and biomechanical fields. And that is what I ended up doing. I actually started out in biotech, first as a industrial design engineer and then a system and design engineer, at which point I taught myself software development and switched over to software development in biotech, where I actually made my first game. So the company that I was working for was trying to digitize and provide records for tracking concussions, both an on-skin sensor to track impacts as well as a testing suite. And one of the things they found was it's actually very hard to do the standard concussion tests on children because they ask you to do all sorts of things like say the months of the year backwards starting in December, which children who are playing Pee-wee football aren't really going to know. So I ended up making like really simple pattern matching, click the blue butterfly sort of games. But it allowed me to really dip my toes into it, to start understanding how that works. Because I would say game development feels quite different than other software development. And then from there on, I did everything I could to break into the industry. I think something that is probably notable about my career is I am very much a generalist. I haven't really specialized in anything aside from potentially leadership, and I think that's a very soft, squishy skill set just to have specialized in it all. I actually did work as a producer for an indie studio before I ended up starting my own studio, partially because I couldn't find work. I was having a hard time getting hired as a mechanical engineer and industrial design engineer with some software experience in the games industry when I was competing with, industry veterans and people fresh out of college that had a more focused degree. I actually started the project that I'm about to ship, Potion's Curious Tale, at that time, which is almost a decade ago. It was a minute. And it was intended only to be a portfolio piece. It was intended to just show to potential employers and to get their interest. But so many people were interested in this game that I ended up pursuing it, having a successful Kickstarter, and building a team. The Kickstarter was not successful enough that I could do that as my full-time job. I still needed to pay rent. So I ended up getting other jobs within the industry, having sort of proved myself there. I was able to do production and technical production. And then I also did technical product development, and then went sort of like a solutions architect route. I was also a freelance games journalist for a bit. I was also the marketing coordinator for Xbox Games with Gold. Really, I did all sorts of random jobs before going full time in more of the technical production, technical product management route. After that, I had been serving actually for the IGDA board of directors for a few years when Jen McLean stepped down, and I really wanted to give back to the industry that had done so much for me. That's why I was on the board of directors, and that's why I had run IGDA Seattle in the past, is because so many people contributed to me being able to start my career and start my studio, that I really wanted to be able to give back and make it easy for the next generation of people, game developers, women in particular, that wanted to get into this, because I know that as a woman, I faced a lot of weird discrimination within games, not as much the games industry, a little there, and even within like my second grade math class as a kid. It was, there's a lot of hurdles that some of us have to overcome in order to get into a STEMs field, and particularly game development. So after being the executive director for 3 years, including pretty much the whole pandemic, I decided to get a little bit closer to game development directly again. That's when I joined Phoenix Labs. I saw them through an M&A process that led to an investor-backed management buyout, which was over a accelerated timeline. And I felt that at that point it was probably good to step back, finish my game, get back into the code base, and sort of, really sharpen my teeth. And it's been really enjoyable. So I'm really feeling fresh as an indie developer, even if I've been working a little bit too much.
But I have like an infinity of questions, and Sophia, I promise I will
Yeah.
give you space to come. But
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
I
I have
just
got
wanted.
questions of my own though, but yeah, go ahead.
I will ask only one, and then I will give it to you. I just wanted to, part of the question I had that I think you started answering there, just wanted to get back a bit, is, can you tell us a little bit of some of the hurdles that you felt, especially in the beginning? I think a lot of people in the industry, when they are trying to break in and really start and get that first job, or especially if they don't have the normal traditional education where they go and do internship and then get a job, they have a lot of difficulty on that, and we can try to avoid and ignore and say that, oh no, it's an equalitarian business, but unfortunately no, it's not. And we have to talk about the elephant in the room as well. But could you tell us a little bit of some of the hurdles that you saw, like the ones, especially the ones that you thought that it was kind of more directed to the fact that of your education and the fact that your gender?
Yeah. So I would like to make the joke that being a woman in the games industry is like picking a character class or a race in D&D, and you get +2 to opening doors and -2 to being taken seriously. And that is what I've found. There are a lot more opportunities to get on panels and to benefit from really amazing mentorship programs. But there's still this sense that you're tokenized or you're not actually being taken seriously. And I encountered that several times, especially in my 20s. Anytime I would go to a game development event, not anytime, but frequently, if I was standing near a male that was anywhere near my age, someone would just assume I was there as a girlfriend and not there as a game developer. And I am someone who, in that situation, just like aggressively inserts myself and introduces myself. But I can certainly see that being a huge hurdle for people to overcome. And I am sure that it caused me to rockily start some conversations that should have been a bit more smooth if they had given me proper acknowledgement instead of ignoring me in the time. There was also a few instances where, especially talking about my indie game development, I would talk about my game and people would ask about my team. And I would say, oh, I have an environment artist that does this. I have an animator that does that. I have an audio person that's doing the music and audio. And then I do everything else. And they would look at me and say, well, then who does the programming? It's like, me? That's part of everything else? Like, where, like, it felt like such a weird question. Often get assumed to be an artist. I don't think anything was wrong with art, but I certainly am not an artist. I do not have that sense very well. And I don't think anyone was trying to be dismissive or rude or mean, but it's those inherent biases, right? It's
It's the
those subconscious
stereotype.
biases, right?
Yeah.
And then for a personal struggle of mine, and this is probably going to come off as startling to most people who know me, I actually have really bad social anxiety. And one of the ways I started my career was aggressively networking. So trying to build up my connections in the industry, trying to make friends, trying to find mentors, introducing myself awkwardly to strangers at conferences in a polite way, at least. And as somebody that has social anxiety, that takes a lot of energy. It is quite a drain. And I certainly have had, like, after any major conference, I need to sort of go curl up in a ball to recover. So that's something that has been a challenge as well, in addition to the struggles of being recognized for my actual skill set.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that intimately as well. Anyone who sees me up on stage doing my presenting, doing my hosting, they think I'm like this extreme extrovert, and I'm really not. There's like personal me and work me, and it's like a switch that I can flip. So I think some people don't get that it's kind of like draining because it's not my natural way of being. I can do it and it's fine and I don't hate it. It's just not natural to me. It's something I've learned, and it's like a skill that I've gained through years of doing it.
It's like an acting, right? Like I feel
Yeah,
that when I'm on stage, I'm acting. I am that
yeah,
person on stage. There are fragments of that person that are me, because you're not a good actor unless something of you is in it, but it's not the 100%, right?
yeah. But no, to what my question is probably somewhat similar, but enough differentiated enough that I feel like I can still ask it, which is that like, because I got asked this on the weekend by just a friend who's nothing to do with the games industry whatsoever, and just said, well, what advice would you give to someone who wants to get into games, who's young, who's just starting out, who wants to get into games? And I know what I said, and I feel like and I want to hear what your thoughts are before I sort of inject what I said into it. But it's like, I feel like what I said is sort of good advice and easy advice, but I also feel like it's quite sad at the same time. But yeah, I'll share that in a minute. But yeah, I just wonder what you would say if someone said to you, like a friend said, my, child wants to get into games. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I guess my first piece of advice would be make games. Like, from the very second that your child or yourself decides you want to make games, start making games. You don't have to start them in a program. You can start them on pieces of paper. Just going through the process of understanding game development or figuring out game development is great. You can start by making a board game. You can start by making a scratch game. You can start by writing a mod for a game that you're already familiar with. Um, but just starting that process, starting that exploration, and starting to understand what aspects of game development you even like. I think a lot of people who want to get into games don't know what they actually want to do in games, or they have an idea, and then as they start their career, it ends up going in a completely different direction because they discover something throughout the process that they had never thought of before. So, not a particularly sad piece of advice, but I would say, yeah, in general, you just start making games and, connecting with people and things like that too. But the number one thing is just to start that exploration.
Well, yeah, I mean, and actually, I gave very similar advice, whether it be, in my case, obviously talking about whether you want to get into writing, start writing, doing these things. I suppose partly the reason why, even though my advice is effectively the same, I feel like it's somewhat sad is because I, I feel like you put a much more positive spin on it. It's about learning, finding what you want before you dive into it, finding where your skills are and your interests are and all those aspects, which I think is brilliant advice. And I kind of prefer your more positive spin on it to mine, which is, I feel like something you touched upon is right now, there are very few opportunities for entry level people, I feel, in games. There's a lot of jobs that say they're entry, but when you actually start to dig into them, they want like 1 or 2 years of experience. They want, you to deliver a portfolio. They want you to have shipped a game. And I'm like, that's not okay. It is technically a beginner's role still, but it's sort of misleading in many respects. And so I suppose the reason why I felt like my advice was somewhat slightly sad was that I feel like in the industry, we would do better if there were more opportunities for true entry level positions to bring people in rather than expecting people to kind of like learn themselves. And then you have that sort of cliche that frustrates me somewhat, which is hit the ground running. It'd be nice if there was more opportunities for people to come into studios and find themselves in a studio. And it's a bit like what you said, it was hard to break in. You had to go and do things yourself, take a bit of proactiveness. And there's nothing, in fact, everyone can benefit from proactiveness. I just think it would be nice if there was like a middle ground, a balancing effect where it's like, come, we'll give you some of these skills that we want for you to be a part of our company culture. Anyway, that was just my thoughts on it. But it seems like whether it's spun positively or negatively, the advice is very much the same, which is whether it's making games, writing about games, I don't know, doing a YouTube channel, whatever it is, just sort of do it, try,
Yeah.
learn.
But that's a good point because there was a question that I wanted to ask Renee afterwards, which means we have similar paths in the fact that we both kind of went to do our own things first because it was almost impossible to get a job in the industry as fresh and with different education as we were. And then is the thing, what happens, like, first is, how was the experience for you to be an entrepreneur first? Like, how did that start for you? And what would the advice be for, would the advice still be the same for someone that, for example, doesn't have this entrepreneurial vein, that doesn't feel comfortable doing
Yeah.
things their own way?
Yeah. So, I think that if you know you want to be a game developer, if you start working on that now, through little bits and pieces, you'll set yourself up well for that transition. Um, I sort of was, uh, honestly, I actually got fired from my role in biotech because of a really toxic workplace. The CEO had been forced out, and the people who took over uh, decided to criticize only the women in the company and caused all of them to leave except for me. And then they decided to fire me, stating that it's because I didn't have a computer science degree, despite them having received a third party evaluation that same day that the systems I had designed for them were robust and like 23 times faster than the previous systems. So I was suddenly unemployed and on unemployment, which gave me a lot of flexibility to dive fully into game development, and also was a place where it wasn't just easing into it. Right, I was sort of I could have gotten another job, I guess, and started game development more slowly, but I decided to really just go fully into it. But if you're in another field right now, or if you're in school or younger, there's a lot of opportunities to start dipping your toe in the water and gaining those skills, that I think are super valuable. I think game jams are something that people often overlook, and there's such valuable experiences in a short period of time that allows you to network, to skill up quickly, to create a portfolio. It's something that I think everyone should partake in, whether they are starting to make their first game or if they're veterans in the industry, because nothing gives you appreciation for other disciplines like trying to be that discipline for a game jam. Just a weekend will give you a lot of respect. If you've never worked with in the art pipeline yourself and suddenly you're trying to be an artist, even if it's just sort of programmer art style, you can appreciate a lot more what the artists on your team are going through when you're working with them in the future.
True. Do you think UGC is going to make a difference in the future of career in games? Because as we're talking about dipping the toes, I kind of have a feeling that, well, I don't have a feeling. I know that a lot of kids nowadays, they are on Roblox, and there are a ton of other good platforms coming up. Like I worked in one, which is Yahaha, and then there is also um, even platforms like Sandbox also started having uh, world building and game building engines inside of it. Do you think that would be an enough experience for people to feel, especially as kids, if that's the environment that they want to work on, or will that more hinder than help? I have double feelings on that. Always good to have other opinions.
Yeah, I think it will help more than hinder. And I think that the UGC environments and contents of today were the modding of yesterday. Like, how many people started their careers modding a first person shooter or Warcraft, right? Like, I know so many people. There's game genres that started as Warcraft map mods. Um, and I think that that's similar. And I've already met some young game developers who are now fully in the industry who came up starting by creating Roblox content. So I think that's definitely a really valuable path, and I think it is going to encourage more youngsters. More kids
Yeah.
in this next generation of game developers, and I think that's really beneficial. Now, that's not to say that people won't necessarily have occasionally poor experiences either with the tool set that they're working with or the communities that they engage with. But I think that is a risk, anytime you get outside of your bubble a bit, right? So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that is a super large negative, but it is a reality, and it is one of the reasons why we, as members of the industry, need to work to ensure that we are keeping these spaces safe, healthy, inclusive, etc.
Oh, and if we're talking about safe and inclusive, and Sophia, I'm gonna give you the space again. Sorry, like I'm
No,
hurdling
it's
it.
fine.
Like as you started as a gamer, and I think when you're talking about safety and issues, and I think more than game development, being a gamer is the biggest issue I think for women nowadays. Um, I have a strong hope that is getting better. I don't know. But. Uh, is do you want to put a word in about the life as a gamer being a girl, or is it a can of worms that maybe are we are we opening Pandora's box here by opening that one? If you're just listening here, Renee's face is like, oh no. Is it a hard one, Renee, do you think?
Um, I personally was very much a game fan and very active in game development communities. I also was a cosplayer for a while, and the amount of toxicity I have faced being an active gamer and cosplayer is pretty extreme. It does not compare. Just 5 years of that is worse than any amount of harassment I have faced since. So I have received death threats called to my personal phone number. I've had people post on forums when they heard I was going to go to events that they would come to the event they knew I was going to be at and physically assault me. I've had my photos posted on certain anonymous forums without my consent, and then had multiple comments on my body and things that people said that they wanted to do or not to do to it. So yeah, I certainly have experienced a lot of harassment as a gamer. And I can see why it drives a lot of people away from games, because it can be horrible, vile, and at the time, especially when I was getting threats, that was before GamerGate, before the authorities ever took online threats seriously, and it didn't matter if I was calling the police in my locale and the locale where I believe the threats were coming from. They basically told me that it didn't matter because it was the internet.
But yeah, and I'm really sorry, like if I really open a can of worms, but I think it's important because I think comes to the question of, do us as part of the games industry and game developers need to do something to well, or can do something to improve this environment, because we do want gamers to get the passion for the game and be able to play and have a safe environment, the same way that we want to have a safe environment to work on. And it's all a complexity thing. So although I'm really sorry for bringing a painful memory, but I think it's also important that we keep the awareness there, because I think it's so easy to just say, oh no, the community is there, we are a different thing, and just like community managers will deal with that, and it's not really true. I think it's everybody's problem.
Yeah, it's absolutely all of our
Yeah.
responsibilities. And this is something I feel quite passionate about. I've actually written 2 separate white papers that touch on this issue. The first of which is social virtuality best practices. I noted, being very early to the VR development scene, that VR developers were very enamored with the cutting edge of technology, which is understandable, but weren't thinking about the additional implications of harassment in VR. And so I both talked about that and then published a white paper suggesting very clear tools and considerations for developers. And then more recently, I wrote a paper called Inclusive Game Design and Development, and it talks about creating a diverse and inclusive world, as well as actions to take and considerations to take when fostering your game community. Noting that if you have game characters that are super sexualized or that are saying rude and inappropriate things, you are setting that example for your community, as well as moderation considerations, ways to prevent and mitigate harassment, and how to uplift community members who are acting positively. I think there are some companies who've done that very well. Rec Room is one that comes to mind, both in terms of putting together very reasonable personal moderation tools and on uplifting community members who are acting positively within their communities.
Nice. Yeah, are your papers available online?
Yes, they're actually all available free as part of IGDA's resource library, and you don't need a membership. They're just all listed there. So if you Google them, they'll pop up and you can click on them.
I will get the links and post together when I post this podcast. So guys, you can go to the link and find this. And Sophia, do you have a question? Otherwise, I keep asking things.
Well, no, I mean, I was going to ask about that very topic, about what we can do to improve things. And I think, you hit, well, all the things I would have mentioned as well. It's about, outwardly representing what you want to see represented in the world. And like you say, I understand a lot of those, I know what it's like to be a target, like you said as well. And I think the problem is so many people maybe don't have that intimate knowledge of it. So sort of know it's a problem, but feel like it's not their place to actively try to change said problem, when it's like the help starts from everyone, I suppose. It's like it's that community effort of bringing everyone together. So I suppose a really easy follow-up to that would be, do you think things are getting better? Do you think it's a brighter future that we have in front of us? Personally, I think we have all the potential for a brighter future. I think we're kind of in the mud at the moment, where it's like there's a lot of people who want to make changes, but it's quite hard at the moment because of various challenges, both within the industry and outside the industry. These are not excuses, far from it, actually. I think it just means you need to up your effort. But I think we're getting there, but it maybe won't be as fast as we would hope. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's never as fast as we hope. I wish I could just snap my fingers and then magically everything's okay. I think that most progress, particularly when it comes to social progress and like culture progress, tends to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah.
And when that 1 step back is happening, it can feel really bad. But I think if we, I try to reflect on how much we've come in the last 2 decades, right? Like the progress overall, the diversity of the games industry over the last 2 decades, how much it is increased is very notable. And even if you look at year over year, you generally see a growth of, by percentage of representation of that community, around 10% every 3 to 4 years. So that means women in games have gone from 20% to 22% to 24%. So that's what I mean by 10% proportionally. And that can feel painstakingly slow when you're in that process. But I think as we look back, we can see that it has been made. But we can't sit on our laurels, right? You can't just be like, there's been progress, everything's solved and fixed, because it really requires consistent effort and proactive effort. So many problems, so many societal problems, so many game industry problems are caused by being reactive instead of proactive. And the best way to establish a culture is to proactively do it. The best way to prevent harassment is to proactively discourage harassment. And the more that people talk about it, the fact we're talking about this right now helps with encouraging those proactive efforts. It brings recognition to the current problems and potential problems, and hopefully inspires people to do something to prevent them.
Well, I wanted to add as well that because this is a good point to finish this podcast. And Sophia, I want your opinion too. But what I wanted to add is, don't be afraid of talking about the painful stuff. Like, there was a reason why I brought these things up, is because if it's very easy, especially if you have a traumatic experience or uncomfortable, it's very easy to try to forget it or dismiss it or try to move on, like people say, because it's society will always tell you, oh, move on, like let it go, come on. And the truth is, if we let things go and we just move on from it without analyzing it, without going to the root of the problem, and we will never change it, because it's so easy to just dismiss
Yeah.
it and go and let it happen to other people. And the other thing that I wanted to add is for the men in the industry, or the people in general that didn't have, it doesn't matter what is your gender, but if you didn't have the problem with harassment as a gamer or as a developer, try to do your research, go look. There are tons of videos and resources out there showing what are the things that are said to gamers, what are the things that happen to game developers when it goes to this level of harassment. Because knowledge is power. If you know what is happening, and you have a full awareness of what is the situation, it gives you the power to really address it. And 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 we need to bring this stuff to light, not only go, yeah, women in, like, I told in the beginning that I have a pet peeve with women in games. It's not with the association, but again, I'm an ambassador of it. Is by the term itself, because for me it sounds like when you say women in game, you're already stereotyping and separating that gender and that
Yeah.
group from everybody else, which I would like to be just a person in games and being respected by being an experienced person that is working in games and can help other people, and that's it. Not, I am not my gender, and I don't think anybody should be put in a box based on that gender, and that was my pet peeve. But hey, we need to start with that, and if the hashtag women in games help people get in, I'm all for it. So your, well, that was how horrible. Your last words, now hopefully not the last,
No,
but the last here.
No, I mean, mine sort of follows on a little bit on that particular topic, and is, also it's kind of like, don't be afraid to listen, whether it's people who've never experienced harassment, or whether it's people who have experienced harassment but have experienced different harassments. One person has not had every life experience, and we can always be learning. So I think it's okay to listen, and that sort of transitions into that idea of being a part of the industry, becoming a game developer or a game writer or whatever it is. Listen to people. You don't have to live on an island, whether that be out of awkwardness or whether that be because you're afraid. Like, listen to people, soak up energy, soak up interest, knowledge, all these sorts of things. And yeah, I think, just going back to the initial thing about how we all get started and how we get going. I mean, I actually think maybe, even though I say this as someone who's, like I say, finds it hard sometimes being extroverted, is, I think, just as much as doing it is meeting people who do it. Go out there, be a part of the community, learn. That's the whole, like what you said, Renee, about game jams. I think actually you can learn just as much from being a part of the community as you can from just sitting down and doing it on your own. And it's what I say when I'm doing my mentoring is, don't ever neglect getting to the meetups and meeting people in the industry, whether they're big C-level people or indies or marketers or writers, whoever it is. There's always something to learn from meeting people.
Absolutely. I have certainly built a large portion of my career and skill set through networking.
Yeah.
And, you don't have to learn everything yourself
No.
through the School of Hard Knocks or study. You can ask advice and listen to others and work with others. It's truly an invaluable experience.
Ending this lovely tone, I want to say thank you, Renee, for being part of it, and
Yeah,
for being
thank
our
you.
guest. Thanks so for the help. I think this, I love this conversation because I think it's hard and lifting at the same time. Is like the whole hero's journey from Campbell. We go
Yeah.
deep into the pit, but then we end up on the winning side. I really love this. Thank you again, Renee. And guys, if you jumped in, go check Renee's game. Potions is out on Steam. You can actually go and
Yeah,
check it
go grab
out.
it.
It is a really cool game, and like I like that I didn't know before that it was an idea from 10 years ago, because I think it also tells people, hey, it doesn't matter if you can do it fast or if you have to take your time. If you really love your idea and you really think that it's something that it's worth doing, fight for it and do it. So yes, guys, go play it. Thank you so much, Renee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
thank you, Soph. I see
No,
you guys soon.
thank you, Patty, as always. I don't know
And
why I'm waving. No one can see me.
you're just used to it.
I just used to. I prefer being on camera. I don't like this no camera nonsense. I'm going to make this a one-time only thing.
We miss seeing your beautiful face as well. But guys, have a lovely week and see you soon. Bye. Yay!